It's not even February, and we're going to talk about love. Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister. In this episode, we talk about love. That's right. But we talk specifically about our unexamined conception of love here in the West. And we look at how what we're actually doing is often trying to play God. Sorry to ruin it, but I hope it sounds interesting to you. If you find this helpful or you find value in our ministry, our speaking, our podcast, and what we're writing, you can support us by going to www.toltogether.com. Just click the donate page. And also, feel free to spread the word, write reviews, tell people all about us. Many of you are doing that, and we can't thank you enough.
Cameron, you've been the master of this. Apparently, you were speaking on this recently and have been doing some interesting research on helping us think through our presuppositions about modern love. No, everybody is on the edge of their chairs waiting to hear what you have to say here. Educate us, oh friend.
I'm definitely an authority on love. A lot of people come to me for advice. And
People don't know this,
complete.
but I mean, look at him.
We joke about how we can take the fun out of anything, including love and romance, and watch me do it now within the span of 30 seconds. So I'm talking about our assumptions behind love. So part of what I was doing, Nathan, was I was speaking to a group about cultural apologetics, but I was focusing specifically on some of our major cultural assumptions that are largely unexamined. I think we've said many times on this podcast that most of the questions in the wider culture right now really are centered on meaning. And we're not the only ones saying this. A lot of people, everybody from Jordan Peterson to Tom Holland to Ion Hersey Ali.
I think we said it before Jordan Peterson did, but who cares about
We
us?
were there first. Okay, Dr. Peterson, we were there first. And that's not a problem. I mean, there are perfect archetypal responses to that as well. But anyway, okay, enough. I'm really done there. But so they're centered on meaning, and so they have a lot to do with, love, freedom, happiness, those kinds of assumptions. But I came across a footnote in a book by N.T. Wright, and, this is the joy of reading books with footnotes. You're going to get clued into all sorts of other great voices. So there are benefits to being a nerd and taking the fun out of every conceivable subject, including love. So just so you know. But this footnote was to a guy named Simon May. May. I had not heard of him. And he's a philosopher. He's written extensively on the Western conception of love. He has 2 books on the subject, both Oxford University Press. And this book, the one that the one in question for me, is titled Love, A New Understanding of an Ancient Emotion. And he just noted that a lot of the writings on love today tend to be quite vague and hazy when it comes to what love actually is
You,
and what
you
its real
mean
motive.
love is what makes a Subaru is not philosophically clear to you?
That he found that to be somewhat lacking, apparently. And also the tautological phrase "love is love." I guess that
Mm.
didn't really, hold much water for him either. But he's very focused on what precisely is it and what are its ends. Now, I'm not gonna talk about all of that, but I want to offer one major part of his thesis here for us and for your consideration as you're listening in, because this as it's what for me, it was one of those things where once it was pointed out, I couldn't unsee it. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this because this seems so obvious, but I didn't see it. So he argues that the Western conception of love is, no, hey, shocker, on borrowed credit from Christianity. I'm going to explain exactly how in a second here, but that it is the key religious substitute. Not the hard sciences. The hard sciences can
Oh,
do
really?
that a little bit, but they're really not up to the full task of supplying total meaning and purpose in the way that love does. And I think,
Is
yeah,
this
I'll pause there a
is this
second.
taking a shot sort of well, is this taking a shot, you kinda have this like, in the apologetics world of, we used to say God is love, and now we say love is God. Is this kind of
Mhm.
playing in
Yes,
that
it
phraseology
is.
of we've deified something that's downstream from the divine?
Yes, but with a very important caveat. It's not so much love is God as you'll see, it's more like we're God, or
Ah,
we are little gods of love. And so he looks at he basically considers love with 4 qualities that characterize our conception of love these
I'm
days.
gonna write them down.
Write them down, take them to the bank. But basically, he says, so we again, remember, these are, for many people, tacit assumptions. We kind of just hold these largely unexamined. They are pre-theoretical, to use Charles Taylor's language. So it's not like we have a carefully spelled out philosophy of love, but if you press us, these are the kinds of qualities that come to the surface. So number 1, it is love. True love is unconditional. It is disinterested. So we'll come back to that one. That one brings up a number of interesting problems. But yeah, so it's disinterested in the sense that it's not occasioned by any quality of the person or the love object. It's
Oh, okay.
disinterested. So it's pure. Think platonic there. So it's disinterested. It is all affirming. I think that one is going to make the most sense when I just say that one out loud. Love is
Yep.
all affirming. I think that is very culturally accepted. And finally, it is enduring. He uses the word enduring advisedly. He's not saying eternal, but yeah, so it must last in
Okay.
order
Let,
for it
let me make
to.
sure we got it. So for
Yes.
people playing along, unconditional,
Yep.
disinterested, all affirming, enduring.
Yes.
These are the pre-theoretical conditions of modern love.
Yes. And so he points out, so Simon May points out very reasonably, if you just pause for a little bit, it will very quickly become apparent that a human being cannot pull these off.
Hang on.
There's
Can you go
no.
through it? Can you give me 2 sentences of definition on each one again before you go where you're about to go? So, clarify what you mean by what we mean by unconditional.
Yes, unconditional. So, in a sense, one way of putting this is that you your love for the person is entirely gratuitous and spontaneous. These are the words that he's using. So, it's going to be very hard to say this without immediately beginning to think in theological terms, because this is the kind of language that we use to describe kind of God's grace, or really the
But what does
nature of
this look like in human love?
divine love. Oh, it would mean, so if you put all of these together, it would mean that you love a person, and your love, here's another really interesting one. So the outcome is your love for this person confers the value on them.
Oh, okay.
It
Mhm.
has to. If you hold this definition to be true, because if it doesn't, well, then your love's not disinterested, or it's conditioned by some kind of value that the person holds independent of you. But in this way, if it's just a bestowal kind of thing, their value obtains because you confer it on them just by loving them.
Wow.
Just the
So
good.
wait,
I know.
this is
Yeah.
this is deeper than I thought because so love their lovability is an extrinsic value rooted in your emotion.
Their lovability is part of you. So your love for them is must in no way be conditioned by any intrinsic lovability that they hold. Because if they held some intrinsic kind of value, I know, again, I hasten to point out, we don't think about it in these terms. But this is what happens when you follow a thought to its logical conclusion. This is part of what really, when
Congratulations to anybody who is still listening to this podcast.
I
Hats
told you
off to
we'd
you.
ruin it. I told you we'd ruin it.
Okay.
But this is what, yeah, what a service that really profound thinkers will perform. They'll follow the thought to its logical conclusion. And so if you say, as many, and he quotes quite a few secular thinkers who hold this kind of definition, say it's disinterested and sounds very platonic, but the person, so in other words, they have value for you, but that value is what your love gives to them.
Where's the phrase "beauty is in the eye of the beholder" play into this? Is because I I'm trying to
Well,
think of like I'm
this
trying to
isn't beauty, this is love. So
yeah.
that's a separate consideration. But
Okay.
I hear you there. I hear you.
So what I'm saying though is, um, is this not love is love though? Because you're saying that
Yes,
person is lovable because I love them. So I mean, we
it is.
jokingly said that early on, but is that not actually
It is. So it is love is love, but this is it spelled out. These are the philosophical kind of outworkings of love is love. And so obviously when you really, so this is why Simon May wrote the book. Because if you probe that, there's no there there. Now, the
Oh,
there
oh, no, hang on. So wait, this let me guess. So, hang on, I'm tracking with you here. So, the object I love the object because it is lovely to me, but that level of, um, the rootedness of the actual ontology of the value is rooted back in myself, and so it is a form of self-deification because I am the one that determines what is lovely. Is
yes. So and but a very specific type of self-deification. So let me spell this out very practically. The kind of love being described here is divine love. But it's not just any old divine love. This is not how Allah loves, for instance, or this is not how Zeus loves. This is a particular understanding of Christian love, the Christian God, and the grace of God's love freely bestowed on us. And of course, God, as the maker of humanity, confers upon us value.
Mhm.
So but because he is God, because he is I am that I am. So you can see though, when this becomes unyoked, you see how unbelievably powerful this is as an idea and how it can serve as a kind of surrogate sense of meaning, but it's also setting us up for all sorts of relational breakdown if we really are taken in by these promises
Well,
because
that's what I
we
was just
cannot
thinking.
love like this. Yes.
Okay, not only can we not love like that, but the point at which you start determining other people's values based on your feeling for them. I mean, the antithesis of this is devilish.
Yes, it is. And so this is where I mean, we could in secular terms, there are some sort of this is where the language gets really hollow and there are sort of bland appeals to well, we ought to love everyone. A lot of people will point to Kant's categorical imperative and they'll say, we can't love everybody in these kinds of terms because of the limitations of our humanity. So we need to work as hard as we can to love as many people as we can. And it very quickly kind of and I'm not trying to straw man here. I'm trying to show how this breaks down in practice and how it becomes very problematic. But the key one of the key points I want to stress here is that this is on borrowed credit. This is a Christian notion of love, of divine love, and that it is impossible for human beings to love on these terms. And when we try to say that we ought to, we are playing God in a very particular sense. And also, this will explain why, for instance, we there's a principled resistance to any kind of attempt to impose boundaries on the expression of love.
Okay, well,
Whether
you're
yeah,
skipping ahead of yourself here. Is this transitioning us into the all-affirming aspect or the disinterested element?
no, that would be the all affirming aspect.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, there are some links between all of these. There is overlap between them all to a certain degree, but the unconditional really has to do with the spontaneous total freedom of human love, and then the disinterested meaning it's not linked to any intrinsic value or outside value in the love object. But we so I love you because I love you would be another way of saying it.
Well, there's a fun tell me if this plays into this at all because, um, is does this so culturally, we use love as a justification for a lot of ridiculous things, like, "Oh, this person, dropped out of school and quit their job. Well, it's because they were in love." And everybody's like, "Oh, no, that makes sense." You're like, "Wait, what?" Um, w so, like, somebody being in love suddenly becomes this total blanket justification for almost any action or set of conditions possible, and we're just like, "Oh, well, if you chalk it up to love, then of course it's right."
Yeah. Well, part of the problem, the shortcoming of this definition and this way of looking at it is also that it can't account for the specificity of love. This is what Simon May comes back to. I love this person. I love this about this person.
Ah,
If we're talking about romantic love, now he makes another interesting thesis, and I'm not willing to go into too much of this because I haven't read enough on it. But he makes a thesis. His is a thesis that the love of a parent for a child has replaced romantic love as the paradigmatic love expression.
Ooh,
The yeah,
I'm not sure I know what that
that's
means yet.
me neither. So I wanna so I'm gonna steer clear of that one until I get a chance to hear exactly what he says about it. That's a very provocative idea. But part of what his concern is that he says this over and over again in the book for people who have this kind of platonic sort of expression or well, what's ultimately a very Christian expression. He says, "Well, what about it doesn't account for the specific aims of love, the desire aspect, the love of a particular person for very particular reasons, and for the promises that a relationship with this person holds for you. You see in them some beautiful possibilities for your life, for rootedness, for adventure, for joy together. You love certain you I mean, in other words, the things you love when you if you fall in love with somebody, it's very darn specific. You have things you really love about this person that
Uh,
that make you drop out of college, that make you go on a crazy road trip, that make you do
is
these behave erratically.
is the phrase you just used, "falling into love," part of this subconscious? Like, like, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, "Well, after, I properly calculated and reasoned my way into this relationship." That doesn't have the
Right,
romantic hallmarkiness
right.
that falling into love. Is this the accidental nature of this modern view
Well,
of love somehow play into this?
well, certainly the yes, the spontaneity of it because it has that again, that has everything to do with our conception of freedom. So you won't have that in an arranged marriage scenario, right? That vision of romantic love where it's predicated on that joy and spontaneity. But you're seeing some of those contradictions there too because there's no romantic comedy about disinterested love. That wouldn't be very interesting. I mean, A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is kinda like some of Shakespeare's, romantic plays, those are the prototypes of the romantic comedy. They don't work unless you have, you know, major overflow of feelings and very specific, you love, why does Tristan love Isolde, for instance? It doesn't have to do there's nothing disinterested about that.
So,
So
what
you run
where's
into that problem on a very practical level.
all right, let's jump to the end here because, I mean, of the end of this analysis, and then we'll start working through some, I think, constructive Christian reflections where we necessarily need to take this to go. But what's the end of the classic fairy tale? And they all lived happily ever after.
Mm,
So the enduring piece is stamped in there, and as part of the argument that is being made here is that how in the world do you have a love that is unconditional, disinterested, and all affirming, and also is enduring?
mhm.
If the conditionality of it can change at any
Right.
isn't a
If we're
litmus
finite
test.
Yeah, finite creatures with limited capacities. How can any of that be true? And very obviously, it cannot. It's an easy answer. I mean, even can we go to the all-affirming one?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're in the all-affirming territory now, again, culturally, let's just spell out, this makes a lot of sense. So we don't wanna impose any boundaries or limitations on love. That makes sense because if actually, if we don't without realizing it, we're trying to play God. We see ourselves as little gods of love, little love gods.
Little
That's
cupids.
the Yeah, little cupids. These are my words, not Simon May's, by the way. He's way more eloquent, so please don't confuse the 2. But
Embrace your
if that
cherubic qualities.
embrace that cherubic quality, pull the arrow back. But if that's true, if we're all little love gods, then we're gonna receive any kind of rules or boundaries that are imposed from an outside source on our expression of love as an affront to our authority, an affront to our free and true and spontaneous and exuberant expression of love. So obviously, we can think about the LGBTQIA plus, whatever else you want to add in there. Is you can think about all the concerns there from from gay expressions of love to trans to also increasingly polyamorous expressions of love. So that one, by the way, is no longer an outlier. I mean, and again, the same sort of love is love. If these people are in committed, loving, devoted relationships, then who are we? Who are we to impose any boundaries on that free expression? So it explains kind of the principled resistance to any kind of rules or boundaries or regulations, except for the ones that happen to be culturally unacceptable at the moment. And I'm not gonna go down that road,
That
but I mean,
that does
yeah.
that seem to be like there is a fairly surface level conflict here of, like, what happens when you have competing definitions of love.
Right, but here let me go a little deeper on that though one. The all-affirming thing also it blithely assumes that you can take into account a person and all of their particularity and affirm them exhaustively, and we can't do that.
So what does the role the judgment plays in love then here? So, like, if you're not making any critical distinctions, if you're all affirming, it's unconditional, it's disinterested in the particularities, is there a rational component to our
Beyond I mean, I think I wanna play devil's advocate here. Obviously, it's gonna be difficult to have a straightforwardly rational response given what I've said, but I think what somebody might say, if somebody is a secular humanist or sort of that persuasion, they may say something along the lines of, in order to have a good, flourishing society, if we have people loving in these terms and fulfilling the categorical imperative to the best of their abilities, and to the best of their abilities, rising to the nobility of this kind of love, even if it's just with one person or a few, then we have a much better society where there's cooperation and harmony, and people are taking care of themselves and others. I think that's about the best. This is the best you can do.
Mhm. Okay.
Beyond that, I don't think you can say much.
I'm thinking as you're saying that, maybe in the more Christian concept of a marriage vow of you get to the line of, like, "Out of all the world, I have chosen you."
So can I Yes, right. So, but again, these are expressions of God and his grace. And so that's why there's that amazing that the s- the two great commandments are love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So notice that sequence there, though. You and I
Mhm.
point this out, I think, quite a bit. You
Ontological
can
priority.
absolutely. There's no way to love anyone as yourself unless you have first fallen at the feet of the living God, surrendered to him. And that's why we also hear, we love because he first loved us. His love, his divine love liberates us to love others in a selfless manner. On our own strength, we cannot do that. It's impossible. But I also want to get real. I want to meddle here a little bit, Nathan, and show how you don't necessarily not everybody buys into all of this hook, line, and sinker, but sometimes we swallow a bit of the poison. And let me give you one very practical example that I hear a few actually practical examples that illustrate this point, Nathan. Let's say somebody, and we all know people who fall in this category. We also know some major Christian thinkers who fell into this category who come kind of to the end of their lives and they say, you know what? I have a child who's in a homosexual relationship, but you know what? They're a lovely person, and their partner is a lovely person, and they're in a loving, monogamous relationship, and they're both decent people. This is my mind has changed on this. I see it differently now. Now I wanna tread with sensitivity here because, I mean, so my kids aren't fully grown yet, and so there are some, who knows what
Decisions they will make, who knows? Yeah.
decisions they will
Same
make
for
and
me.
things are before me. So I don't wanna I'm not speaking as some spiritual sage on a mountaintop. All I'm doing is I'm pointing out that this partakes of kind of that vision of divine love unyoked from divinity.
Mhm.
Or yeah, I mean, and you could or and there's a this is a less this is a even more practical example. The fact that so many pastors, and I've had a lot of them talking to me about this one, have to deal with young people in their church who live together and are not married. And their response is just sort of, "We love each other, and this is the 21st century, and we'll probably get married eventually, but is this really such a big deal?" And then if the pastor tries to challenge them and use some spiritual authority, well, they either can say, "Go to you know where," or they just leave and go to a different church where they won't be annoyed. But again, that's the love is love mindset. That's a we call the shots with regard to
So,
love.
can I put a sentence in here, I think for people we're working on keeping up here? there's a difference between saying that I generate and produce love, or that love is something that pre-exists and precedes me, and I learn to participate in it. And so
There
what
is
we're
an
talking about here
author.
is the generation of it. Where does it come from? And if it
Mm,
truly does come from the individual, then yeah, who are we to say?
sure.
But if there's a broader, deeper underlying love
If the
is the word, then we participate it within the boundaries of the way in which it's actually given and defined, not within our own self preferences or definitions.
if God is love and we are not God, then we can work this one out. Love has is I mean, love has a and also expressions of love. There's an if God is love and he is the author of a particular expression of love, say marriage, then he is the one who exercises authority over the expression of, say, romantic love. Now, that's, of
So
course, not the
is
only expression of love, by the way, but that's one very
oh, okay.
important one for us
So
in the West.
two things. One is it's a funny question. Is like, is there a wrong way to love?
Of course
And
there
how
is.
you
Yes.
and how well, but see, I think that's very. I think you're answering that very
Yes.
Christianly.
I am, yes.
And I would agree with you on that, but I don't think I've ever actually heard somebody say that question out loud.
Well, no, and I think that's a very good question. Is there a wrong way to love? But I think instead of going immediately to, "Well, you're a Christian, so you think
Well,
gay love is
yeah,
wrong."
I
That's
okay,
actually let's not go there.
that's my but
Hold on.
that's my second point though, is that you're saying you can't that you're proving the origin of the thing by the way that you use the thing, even if you're metastasizing it into your own, um, I
So yeah, there a wrong way to love? One way I think we can actually get some traction with people outside the church is to say, well, selfish love is bad. Most people would agree on that. If we spell that out a little bit, if you find somebody whose love is either it's basically concentrated on their own self-gratification, their own satisfaction to the detriment of somebody or other people. I think most would be with you and say, "Okay, that's not good." And so then work your way from that one from that I think that's the starting point to say, "Okay, well, if there are misguided sort of expressions of love, and if we can agree that selfish expressions of love are on the wrong foot, then it would seem that there is some sort of rule governing love, some sort of external rule independent of us."
mhm.
And I think go from there. That's a kind of natural law way to go, and not everybody's gonna find that persuasive, but I think what it will do is it'll show before you immediately run to, well, all of these different, from homosexuality to the movement, these are wrong before you immediately spring to different see, these are outworkings, particular outworkings. You go back to a fundamental sort of orienting source of wrongness and say, well, selfishness is wrong. And there are selfish expressions of love. Somebody might say, well, no, there's if it's selfish, then it's not love. So you could have that discussion. But I think there are selfish expressions of love.
Well, so let me a couple thoughts here. One, so I think I first ran into an iteration of a response to this that preceded it, and is it's Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's either in Life Together or Act and Being. I can't remember where he talks about that human love is most often binding. If you're trying to love someone just for the sake of themselves, it is almost always manipulative in the sense that I express my love to you in this way to get you to respond in this way back to me. That the dyad construct of love is inherently problematic and leads to bad outcomes. Whereas if you have a triadic sense in which the other person has intrinsic value in the eyes of God, and
Yeah.
therefore I treat them with the respect that is conferred upon them and the dignity and the sanctity that they have because of their intrinsic value rooted in the character of God, then that puts specific boundaries and limitations on the way in which I express myself to them, loving or otherwise, in all interaction, because I recognize that I do not define their value, and therefore there
Right.
are borders and boundaries on how it is or is not appropriate for me to interact with that other person.
What that does is it now allows you to, if you really love them, you want to, you're concerned with their good, their well-being. And that might come at the cost of your own short-term happiness even. If you really care about somebody and you are willing their good, let's say you have somebody who is engaged in a form of destructive behavior. People always give exotic examples here, like drug addiction and all of that, and those are huge features of life that we deal with. But let's pick something less immediately serious in our eyes. But let's say you're in a church and you got somebody who likes to run their mouth. This is a big problem in human life. It's a huge problem here in the South, as where I live. So this person's a gossip, but it's wreaking real havoc in the church, and it's incredibly destructive. And you know that when you confront this person, there is a strong chance that you will lose the relationship, at least in the short run, possibly.
You will
So
become
that
material for their next conversation.
yes, but if you really love them and you care about their well-being and their good, you will go to them first, and you'll try to do this in the most generous and loving way that you can, but you'll be honest and you'll confront them. I mean, confrontation is really the key word here. Your true love, if you're dedicated to the good of somebody else and you recognize that this person was made by God and that is where their value comes from rather than you and your own bestowal.
So
Yeah.
years ago, you'll get a kick out of this, Cameron. Years ago, we were having is some lesson at church, and somebody said, what are qualities of a good friend, or what are you looking for in a good friend?" And there was like that little like Sunday school awkward silence where nobody's saying anything right off the bat.
Crickets.
And I
Yeah.
said, I said one of the primary characteristics that I see in a good friend is somebody who's willing to tell me that when I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And everybody just looked at me and they're like, "What a weirdo!" But
Well, yeah.
can you justify me, Cameron? Go.
Well, of course, that's right, though, because if you have a larger
So he
vision of
agreed with
love.
me. Is he my friend? I don't know.
Right. So, well, if if we recognize that we're human beings with limited and finite capacities and we're sinners, and we're fallen, and then it just and that we're prone to selfishness and we're prone to destructive patterns of behavior, then it makes total sense that the people who love you will be the people who are willing to call you out, and you'll be willing to return the favor. And that this is sometimes painful, sometimes awkward, sometimes it puts strain on the relationship, but it's just a natural consequence of us being held to an external standard and being creatures rather than gods. And so
Well, there you go.
so I mean, that's really, I mean, so much of this conversation here is predicated on the notion that we're not God. And the real simple way, I mean, you could spare yourself all of the terminology and all of the ways in which we've ruined romantic love and all love and otherwise in this conversation by just saying God is God and we're not. And when we
So
try to play God,
basically,
yeah.
if you're interested in a young man or woman, you should send them this podcast. This will really be,
Mhm.
some people do roses, but this one, this is how you find the real keepers, guys.
Ultra romantic. I think people have sometimes referred to us as the love line of Christianity.
So, hey, just to interrupt ourselves here, the we want to celebrate. Like, is there not an implicit celebration of the good here? And that we want to replicate it and adopt it and co-opt it. Like, if imitation is the highest form of flattery, is there not something about culturally the way in which we're striving to do this, a an implicit nod to something that is beautiful and good and life-giving? Is so we don't want to act like these are bad things, like enduring love, yeah. But what we're saying is that like the sneakiness of it is just that simple. To reiterate what Cameron said, it's a creator creature kind of thing. If you're the creator of love, the history of broken relationships spells out perfectly what that looks like. If you're a creature who receives love, that's the definition of salvation. So,
It's actually really good news. It may
yeah.
sound at first to our humanistic ears, to our 21st century ears, "Oh, this is a huge imposition. This is restrictive," but ultimately, it's the opposite. It's liberating. Trying to play God in our relationships with love is very destructive, and we can see the consequences all around us. But if we can receive God's love, and then we are freed to love others in a selfless manner that seeks their good and our good, it's really, really good news.
Well, I think this has been a fascinating conversation, Cameron, and I would like to say on behalf of all of our listeners and myself, thanks for reading books.
You're welcome. I think I might need to apologize to some others, but thanks for tracking with us. We know that this was, yeah, sometimes it gets a little trenchant. And by the way, we'd love to hear from you on all of this. The best way for us to hear from you and for you to respond to us and interact with us is to go to TOL Connect. If you haven't signed up already, it's not very expensive at all. You can chat with us. You can get wind of some of Nathan's kind of developing thoughts on there as well, and you get to meet the other listeners who are a very thoughtful group indeed. Lots of great discussions, but you can sign up there by going to www.toltogether.com. And if somehow you have missed it in the midst of all of this love talk, you are listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.